Welcome to episode 2 of my Lefty Guitar Conversion, where I'm converting a right-handed guitar into a left-handed guitar. If you haven't seen the first episode where I disassembled it and painted it, I'll put a link to it in the description. In this episode, we're going to be installing this copper foil shielding tape. The copper foil tape is really cool. It's just a really thin copper foil with an electrically conductive adhesive on the back. That way when you overlap pieces, you don't have to solder the joints together. The ground will be able to flow between the two pieces. I'm going to start out by wiping the control cavity down with a rag that I've just slightly dampened with some mineral spirits. And that's just to make sure that it's really clean and the tape is going to stick really good. When it comes down to it, I may really not be needing to do this, since I'm only going to put this guitar back together with one humbucker in there. Pretty good chance I'm not going to get a whole lot of noise anyway, but it's not going to hurt anything. I'm just kind of measuring it to length, roughly. I'm just sticking it in there. So I'm really finding that this is actually quite easy to do. The biggest thing you have to worry about is making sure that your foil does not overlap too much where it's going to stick out and be seen outside the edge of the pickguard. Other than that, it's really easy. I found that a pencil eraser works pretty good to push it down into the corners. I'm just measuring the size, cutting off little strips. It doesn't matter, I guess, if it's a whole bunch of pieces in there. Kind of reminds me of installing Dynamat. If any of you have ever done much car stereo, if you've ever worked with Dynamat, you just kind of cut it and shove it in there, and this kind of reminds me a lot of the same thing. I just slid it a little bit around the corners so I can fold it over. Now you want it to fold over the edges because when you put the pickguard on, the pickguard also gets this insulation, and when you screw the pickguard down, you want it to make contact with this foil. So that way it's grounded on the bottom and on the top. It kind of sandwiches it in there. Alright. Well, there we go. Got the control cavity all covered with the foil shielding tape wrapped over the edges. I had to take the pickguard and check the fitment around this edge to make sure there wasn't any hanging outside the edge. A couple spots I had it hanging out just a little, so I trimmed it back a little bit. Up here, this is all covered by the pickguard, so I'm not worried about that. Also, don't forget your jack cavity, and should be good. Now we can get our ground wires hooked up. I'll start rewiring by running a few of the ground wires first. I can't complete the whole wiring because I'm waiting for the pickup. It's on back order right now and it hasn't come in yet, so I'm not going to do the rest of the wiring. But I am going to do some of these ground wires and get some of the wires run and soldered in place, and then we'll move on and work on the neck. If you look online for Strat wiring or proper grounding of Strat style guitars, you're going to find a million different ways that people do it, and some people feel really strongly one way or another. I'm not really worrying a whole lot about that. All I want to do is make sure everything's grounded, and we'll see how it works. If I get any hum or buzz, then we'll go back through and we'll look at it again later. So the first thing I'm going to do is install the tremolo claw, and we'll get the ground wire soldered onto that. The tremolo claw just screws back in. I find it's easiest if you use a long Phillips head screwdriver. You kind of have to have your screwdriver at a bit of an angle, and the longer the screwdriver, the easier it is to kind of get in there with it. I've poked a hole in the shielding where the wire is going to pass through. So I'm just going to feed that wire up through there. Just give it a little bit of slack. Not worrying about the final length just yet. Make sure you twist your ends. And we'll get our soldering iron on there. Try to get contact with the wire and the cloth. Now, my experience in the past has been that this takes a lot of heat. I don't know if that's because my soldering iron or my technique. And with that wire soldered to the trem cloth, flip it over and give myself plenty of room. Trim that wire off. The wire I'm using is fairly heavy gauge for the wiring. Seems like a common gauge that people use a lot is a 22 to 24 gauge. I'm using probably a 18 or 20 gauge for the main wires. I do have this piece of, I think it's 22, that I'm going to solder a ground wire right to this foil inside the jack cavity and pass it up through here and solder it right to the foil on the actual control cavity. So they're both grounded together. Just strip the end. Pass it down through. And then we'll solder it right to the copper foil. Solder's really nice to that foil. So I've got all my ground wires soldered in. That's all I'm going to do right now on the wiring. I am going to wait until the pickup shows up, and then I'll go ahead and finish getting everything wired. Next step, we're going to do a couple things to the neck to get that switched over to Lefty. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And also subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you don't miss any of these episodes. There's probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 more at least coming up that's going to cover this whole entire build. So if you don't want to miss any of those, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Thanks a lot for watching.